Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone got to enjoy some great pork out there today. Welcome to the first Pork Academy session of the afternoon. I'm excited to be here today with you and to talk about the Future of Everything Pork session. My name is Lindsay Britton. I'm currently enrolled at North Carolina State University and just received my master's in science, as well as I am attending North Carolina State University College of Veterinary Medicine in the fall to pursue my DVM. I'm excited to say that I'm a 2023 Real Pork Scholar funded by the National Pork Board, and so my role as a Real Pork Scholar is really to develop me in three main areas, and that being in networking, community outreach, and being able to speak, as well as in my network building. And one of my favorite components of this project has been my mentor. So I was assigned an industry mentor, and he's been able to give me lots of great information over the past year, and looking forward to the next year of the program. And it's my pleasure to introduce our session moderator, Dr. Chris Hostetler. Chris serves as the Director of Animal Science at the National Pork Board. Dr. Hostetler brings a wide array of knowledge to the table, as he received his undergrad degree from Purdue University, his master's degree from the University of Florida, as well as his PhD from Washington State University. Prior to joining the National Pork Board in 2011, Chris was on faculty at the South Dakota State University, where he taught animal nutrition and conducted research in monogastric nutrition. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Chris Hostetler.
Thank you, Lindsay. I appreciate the introduction, and as Lindsay said, this is the Pork Academy session for the future of everything pork, where we talk about various technologies that have an opportunity to impact our industry. I'm going to start the session by telling a brief story, if I can. I have my grandfather's diary from 1946, and in that diary, he has an entry that says, the front end loader on the tractor sure makes handling ear corn a lot easier, right? He was of the generation where they were transferring from horse farming to tractor farming. And just the simple technology of hydraulics to put a front end loader on a tractor so he could actually scoop it up and he didn't have to shovel up ear corn changed his life, right? And so today we think forward, these almost 80 years, and you think about the technologies that have come to play in our industry or are coming to play in this industry. And if you walk around the vendor displays, it's just mind-boggling and staggering how much technology is going to impact and affect the way that we raise pigs in a better way each and every day, right? So my panelists today are here beside me. Dr. Tammy Brown-Brandel is a professor at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Dr. Brown-Brandel's work is focused primarily on applying engineering to solve animal well-being and improved production efficiency. To her left is Dr. Dan Carlson, who is the Chief Scientific Officer and Senior Vice President of Research and Development at Recombinetics. Dr. Carlson holds a PhD in animal science with an emphasis in biotechnology and molecular genetics. At Recombinetics, he directs the application of gene editing to develop products while continuing to innovate in the field of genome editing. And then to Dan's left is Dr. David Rosario. Dr. Rosario is an assistant professor at Iowa State University. His work focuses on applied research related to swine nutrition and to implementation of smart farming technologies. So these are our panelists today. What we've asked them to do is speak for a little bit about their areas of interest and expertise, and then we will open it up for discussion from the audience. And so keep your ear tuned to those things that sort of strike a question in your mind, and then we'll have an opportunity to ask them. And so I just would turn it over to Tammy to lead us off. Just tell us a little bit about the technologies that you guys are working on or employing at University of Nebraska-Lincoln.
Okay, so I work in an area, it's called precision animal management or precision livestock farming, depending on if you're in Europe or in the US. And what we do is we really take the animal environment, and we really try to apply technology to be the eyes and the ears of the producer 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because we know that producers are busy, they have a lot on their plate. And so if we can monitor those animals throughout the day, then we can then highlight when things are changing. And so it really comes back down to looking for that anomaly or something that has changed over it. What we have found is that you really have to look at individual animals. We cannot look at group means when you are starting to look at changes, right? So we have animals that don't spend a lot of time at the feeder. We have animals that spend a lot of the time at the feeder. So if you just looked at the time at the feeder, that wouldn't tell you anything about that animal in particular. So we look at stuff from gestation through finishing. And we really try to look at the producer perspective and try to find those one or two things that the producer would be, it would be hard for them to pick up on in their walk through the barn. So in gestation, we're looking at, can we monitor condition score 20, especially in grow finish or in the ESF systems. So animals that are walking around, we can then look at condition score changes over time. We also try to look at like lameness. And then in grow finish, we're looking for weight changes. We're looking for some well-being issues. We're looking for time off of feed, right? If they go off feed, then we can pick that up really fast. Some of the stuff we've found is that we can see a drop in feed about 3 days before an experienced caretaker can find them. And that is because when you walk in the barn, if you even think about yourself, when you have a cold and you go into the office and somebody says, "How are you doing?" And think about how you change your posture and how you go, "Oh yeah, I'm doing fine," even though you're feeling really, really crappy, right? So think about those pigs who come into the barn. They don't want to be the low pig on the totem pole, so they change their behavior. So unless you're there for a really long time, you're not going to be able to pick that up. But I think we can pick that up with technology, where we not necessarily can pick it up with our eyes. So the last thing I'll tell you is that when we collect a lot of data, but I'll leave you with two things. But we have to process that data, because if we just gave the data back to the producer, that's too much time. It would take too much time to dig through it to actually get something meaningful. So we collect it, but then we need to process it so we can give you like a red flag. These pigs needs to be checked. This pig needs X, Y, or Z. So part of this is we really need to work with producers. We need to hear from you what things you're looking at to improve and how we can apply technology to that. And sometimes it isn't a direct measure of whatever you're looking at, but it might be a surrogate measure that would come to it, like health. We look at time at the feeder for health instead of looking at health itself. So anyway, that kind of gives you a brushstrokes of what we're working on.
Yeah, so as a moderator, I reserve the right to ask the first question. So I'm going to ask Tammy, what is the two technologies? I hear a couple of different ways of monitoring the pigs. What are the two technologies that you currently use as the interface with those pigs?
So pretty much we're focused on, right now we're using RFID. That might not be where we end up,
yeah,
but that is our stepping stone to where we want to be. We're using low frequency RFID, and the other technology we're using is a depth camera or a digital camera. And yet it was a fleeting technology in the gaming arena. If you remember Connect for Xbox,
yep,
that was, now the freshmen in college don't have any idea what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. It was that fleeting. But that Connect for Xbox really changed the way we could see animals, because a digital camera gives you, the red, green, blue, like your eyes see, but the depth camera actually gives you the distance from the camera to every pixel. So if we put it on the ceiling, we get basically we get a surface, and then we can pick out the pig. We can get a lot of measurements and a lot of heights and shapes using that depth camera. So those are the two major technologies we are using.
Yeah, good. Thank you so much. And Dan, we hear a lot about gene editing in the news today with the advent of CRISPR-Cas9 technology that has really democratized the gene editing process. And so can you just talk a little bit about gene editing in general, and then some of those applications that we might have for the swine industry specifically?
Yeah, sure. So I realize I'm kind of the oddball on the bunch here, so I'll give a little background. I am a farm kid, and I would have liked the front end loader to be part of our routine for managing pigs. As soon as I left the farm, then the pigs left the farm. So the manual labor left, pigs were gone. But gene editing technology, as you mentioned, 2012 is a lot of times where people put the peg in the sand as when it started, but it started a little bit before that. What you want to think about with gene editing technology is all of us have DNA. We have 3 billion base pairs of DNA. That's equivalent to 1,000 books. And using gene editing technology, we can go in there and precisely alter a single letter out of those 1,000 books. And you may think that one letter may not be meaningful, but you can, with one letter change in the genome, you can convert an animal from being susceptible to a disease like PRRS to being resistant to a disease like PRRS. So using those very small changes, you can make big impacts for various traits on the genetics of your animal. And the question then becomes, why would you want to use gene editing to do that if you can find that in the native population? Because most likely, through natural history of breeding and mating, that mutation has come up before, and there's pigs that are resistant to PRRS out there in the wild. But imagine if you're a breeder and you have your pyramid of genetics and you want to introduce that into the top animals in your pyramid. How are you going to do that if you find this one animal in the wild and want to introduce it in your genetics? The answer is you really can't. And it would take you years and years and years of breeding to actually introduce it into the appropriate stock to matriculate through the value chain and make it ultimately onto the farm where it's going to make an impact. So gene editing technology allows us to go and take those elite animals at the top of the pyramid and introduce those exact same things you can find in nature into those animals very rapidly, so you can enable them to be distributed through the value chain. And by rapidly, I still mean it's a fairly long process. There's a lot of genetics that feed the entire industry, so you would not be able to saturate the marketplace with a trait like PRRS resistance, for instance, for a period of time. So it still takes time, but there are several of those traits that you consider the high value traits or the high impact traits that you would consider gene editing technology to use. Other traits like feed efficiency it's lots of letters in those books, and you can't change them all. You have to rely on standard breeding, standard technology to improve on those traits. But the ones like disease resistance or health traits certainly are traits that we can go after with gene editing technology. And so, I'm just looking forward to being able to introduce solutions for producers. Ultimately, I'd like to introduce solutions that are good for consumers as well. So that's my background, and happy to answer any questions about the process of it or any implications.
Now, again, I'll ask the first question. So you talked just a little bit about producer-driven traits versus consumer-oriented traits, and a little bit more about the production versus welfare versus maybe health. So any kind of strategic thoughts about how do we tackle that first? What should we go after to begin with, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think the animal health and disease traits for the pig industry is probably towards the top. So if you think about PRRS, everybody's probably aware of genus PIC with where they're at in their approval process. Hopefully within this year at least, there will be an approval in the United States. There's already approval in Colombia. But those are the traits that really have a high impact and can make a difference for a lot of people. Everybody here probably knows somebody that's went through the process of cleaning their system out of PRRS, and it not only impacts the animal health, obviously, but it impacts the people. Mm-hmm. And it's something that we can solve with this gene edit. It's much more robust than any of the vaccines that have been produced for this. type of disease. And then there could be other diseases that come down the line. I mean, African swine fever may be next, right? And if you can develop solutions for stuff like that, I think those are important. I think the other area is, efficiency is definitely an area that you'd like to improve, and whether that could be edits that make the animal more, have higher feed efficiency, that'd be great, but also potentially quality metrics if you can find high impact alleles to introduce for, increased marbling or something like that, or tenderness traits or so forth. But for the pig industry, it's primarily disease right now. Cattle, we're looking at disease and productivity more so in those spaces.
In cattle, it's mostly to reduce the impact of environmental stressors like heat right now?
Correct, yeah. Our lead program would be slick cattle. So that's basically short hair. They have a lower body temperature. They're able to thrive in more tropical environments. And the tropical environments are where the cattle are the least efficient. So that's one of the bigger areas to impact first. But there's a variety of traits that are of high interest in cattle that we can move forward. And we also developed polled cattle. So Angus cattle are naturally polled, but a lot of breeds out there have to be dehorned, and you can easily do that with gene editing, transferring the exact same genetics from an Angus animal into any other animal without dragging any of that other animal with it.
Yeah, I think back to when we originally imported Michon pigs into the United States back in the late 80s. Iowa State got a herd, Nebraska got a herd, and Purdue got a herd, I think. And we wanted to, through conventional breeding practices, be able to increase the litter size, but we could never prevent dragging along the slow growth rate and the high fat deposition of the Michon pig that came along with it. And so gene editing would be one of those technologies that we would be able to make very precise changes to improve litter size, for example, without carrying along the other traits that were less desirable. So yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Hey, David, one of the things that I hear when I walk around the aisles here at the show is that labor is still an issue for us, right? So how can we employ either artificial intelligence or precision farming techniques to help us to address a labor issue on either sow farms or grow finish within production?
Yeah, great question, Chris. Thank you for the opportunity. I think I will focus that question to specific areas of opportunity as a producer. So in the past, before coming to Iowa State as a professor, I was a nutritionist for a pork producer, an integrator here in the US. And my mind goes to that, and I put my hat of a producer now, and I said, we were facing those issues, but then I will target areas where I can use technology. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One will be the time where I need to sell my pigs to the market, right? I have limited space, so I need to start selling my pigs, and the space becoming restricted. Timing of when that happens is very important. That will mean, for us, it was anywhere from 3 to 5 carcass pounds, which in high prices or pig, that might be $4 to $5 per pig opportunity. So marketing was a big area where I can precisely use a camera to predict the weight of pigs up to 7 weeks in advance to strategize when to market my pigs, right? I think if I make that decision ahead of time, I can make the process more efficient. Another of the focus that we have today is I have problems with pigs starting on feed when I wean the pigs. And I tend to think on what is the tool that I can give to the caretaker in the barn that he can recognize that pig that needs attention more promptly, right, in a day. So we're focusing on understanding the feed intake during that first 2-3 days, because we know that that's going to be a big predictor on how the pig is going to perform the rest of the life. If I use a tool that indicates the caretaker that's a pig that needs attention, the response will be obvious. And maybe a final example will be, I think, just as a way to provide some illustrations here, I think the pre-farrowing area is an area where we are focusing because that's an inefficiency we detected as a producer, but also because that's where technology can play a role. So imagine a camera watching the farrowing process of a sow and alerting an employee the sow is having problems with the farrowing. So you need to go and intervene that's what Dr. Tammy was indicating into. These are the type of alerts that the technology can give you, and you can use the labor more efficiently to target that specific animal.
Yeah, it's not necessarily about replacing the number of people that work on the farm, but it's more about distributing their labor in a more efficient way and being able to focus and target areas of need. Did I hear that?
That's correct. I think that's one way you can take technology is make the people that you're bringing into the farms probably is people that have high training, but maybe you train in technology and you use that technology to make the labor more efficient. I can also see areas where you might save labor with robotics. That might be another exciting area too, and you dedicate labor where it's needed if you can replace in those areas.
Yeah, so I'll open this one up for all of you to respond to. So we've talked a little bit about improving efficiencies. What other, number one, what other areas would lend themselves to improvement? We talked a little bit about welfare, and for some reason my mind went to, hey, there's a Manx cat out there with a short tail. Can we gene edit a pig for tail length so that we don't have to dock the tails, right? That would be a welfare gene edit that we could make. So anyways, so are there other areas, number one, where technologies could address besides labor, besides those things?
Well, if you want me to comment on the tail.
Short tail length? Yeah, sure.
There's a researcher in Oregon, I believe it is, that is working on a short tail or tailback genotype, because there's naturally existing animals that have short tails. So you can find examples out there and try to replicate those animals. You know, obviously one of the challenges with that is if you're altering a gene that has something to do with the tail, it could have something to do with the vertebrae and the length of so you got to be careful with traits like that. As if there's not already a lot of animals like that around, it's really hard to replicate that. Yeah. If you're trying to take it from a different animal, it may not ultimately be the same. So it's possible that it would happen, but it's not like cattle where there was polled and horned animals where it was pretty obvious what you had to do. So it'd take a little bit more time, and the question then would be, how much is it worth? And what would the industry pay for it? Would it be worth enough for the industry to incorporate into the herd?
Yeah. I was not implying we should take a cat gene and insert it in a pig. Let's be clear about that. I was more saying if we could identify that genetic trait that's responsible for that in the cat, we could maybe identify the same. Because I think the cat genome is cloned. That's been cloned.
Oh, they have the cat genome. I mean, it'd probably be the same gene. It's just a slightly different sequence. So you can replicate that pretty easily. I mean, all of us share genes with pigs, and pigs share genes with cats, and it makes it, that's how you can start to piece things together, but it might have a different impact on an animal that it's never been in before.
Yeah. What other inefficiencies do we have?
I think as a producer, again, health is at the top of my list, right? Diseases coming into my farm, so I can see and maybe provide a couple of examples. I will think about biosecurity and how to enforce biosecurity, employees and vendors and et cetera into my farm so I can prevent diseases to come in, right? So if you have a process and use a technology that can address who and when can enter a farm and prevent diseases, that's one. But then two, if the disease has entered the herd, I'm thinking about tracking the growth of the pigs or the feed intake of the pigs. I think that can be two traits that are very responsive. That I have seen data and I have seen technologies picking up within a day or 2 days of that event happening. Which, if you compare an employee, he might take 6 days or more, right? So if you think about that difference, you have 4 days opportunity to treat your herd sooner, and that has a big impact on how pigs will respond overall, right? So.
Yeah, I think Dr. Mike Brum from University of Nebraska, a long time ago now, he put water meters on barns, and he noticed that there was a drop in water consumption, and he thought, what in the world's going on here? And then 2 days later, the caretakers identified a flu outbreak in the barn, right? And he saw that as repetitious he saw that repeatedly, that before the caretaker could about 2 days before the caretaker could recognize that there was a disease issue, there would be a decrease in water flow going to those pigs. And so it's interesting to see if you go to one of the vendors here, Barn Talks, I believe it is, or Barn Tools. They have a water meter that you put on your barn, and now it's all digital, right? It's just automatically uploaded, and the information is there. He was doing it with a spreadsheet back in the day, I think. So
Imagine, I'd like to invite you, and imagine where you have water intake measurements, you have cameras predicting weights, there's sound sensors too, picking up coughing, and you can integrate that data. That's what we're dreaming of, right? And then the day that's happening or the next day, you can go into the barn and address an issue. I think that's what we're talking about, the future of a smart farm.
yeah. And Tammy, what do you think?
So as we are putting more and more technology in the barn, I say we can do 3 things with that technology. First of all, we can look at new management strategies to give the producers. Second, we can look at phenotypes to give geneticists so they can identify, a behavioral trait, and maybe there's a heritability or a gene associated with a certain behavior or certain growth. And the third thing we can do, gets really more to my area, is we can start evaluating the space that the pigs are in. So just like we've put active RFID sensors so we could track the pigs. It's like an indoor GPS. We could track the pigs around the pen. And so then we could see when they're using the sprinkler cooling system and when they're not. We could see what areas they were using and what areas they weren't. So I think if we look at this as we're collecting this data that has many uses to it, we can start digging into how do we design the best pen? How do we reduce our water usage if they aren't using the sprinkler cooling system at 78 degrees, maybe we don't need to turn it on till 84 degrees. But those are some of the questions that we can start asking and start providing information back to the producer.
Yeah, being able to make that decision in a management practice in a much more timely fashion, I think is extremely important in what you're talking about here, right? We traditionally work with closeout data, and for that group of pigs in a closeout situation, those pigs have already gone to market. There's no decision that you can make once you look at closeout data that will affect how those pigs were produced. Now the next group, sure, but not that group. So being able to make those decisions in a timely fashion will greatly improve our welfare and our health and our efficiencies. So yep, absolutely agree with that. So I should probably stop talking and allow some of you all to ask questions. There's some subject matter experts here that can speak to those questions. So here's how this goes. If you were a student in my class formerly, you know that I will call on you if you do not ask questions. So go ahead and ask your questions so I don't have to call on you. Yeah? Juan Steibel.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. We have a microphone, and because we're recording the session, could you use the mic, please? Thank you.
Hello. Thank you, everyone, for this great discussion. What are, in each of your perspectives, the societal challenges, what we need in terms of legislation, what we need in terms of infrastructure, like at the public level, maybe at the regional level, things like we could press on during an election year and say these are the things that rural America needs to advance in the use of technology in a meaningful way.
Yeah, who wants to tackle that one first?
So Juan, let me re-ask the question, make sure that I got it. Okay, so how do we, in a societal way, how do we advance pork production using technology? Is that? What changes do we need? So the very first thing I think we need to do, and it's going to get a little off topic, is we have to engage the public. We cannot be afraid of showing the public what we do. We do great stuff, right? And so we cannot be afraid of showing the public what we do. I think as farms have gotten bigger, there are few people. I live in a rural community. There are so many people in our rural community that don't know where their food comes from, don't know how pigs are produced, don't know where their milk comes from, right? we can't hide behind the closed door, and we have to be able to show the public and be proud of what we do, because we do great stuff. So that's my way to do it. And understand we have to do this in a biosecure way. So I'm not sure exactly how we do that. If we build a farm that has windows that people can come and see, or if we do it with something called a digital twin, where it's not video, but it's like taking information from the barn and then recreating a animation of exactly what's happening in the barn for the public. So I don't know exactly which way we need to do, but we absolutely have to engage the public, and we can't be afraid to ask them their opinion, and then internalize that opinion, and then go back and see if we can improve based on that too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the same goes for gene editing technology, or the technology I'm with. I mean, people need to know what it is. They need to understand it. They need to compare and contrast it to what's out there already. You know, and that comes with education, and you can't hide behind, or, you know, try to avoid, you know, having labels or anything else on packages. You know, from my standpoint, I'm proud that you've introduced a trait that helps production, or helps disease resistance, or helps welfare of an animal. So why hide behind that? Keep those things out in the open, in the public, and then, you know, for being able to alter some different traits with animals, whether it's disease or carbon usage or anything else, you know, to have some programs in place that could help implement those things.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe what I think about is, just to add to Tammy, maybe use technology to embrace the public, right? To take the farm into their hands. Yes, we had to close the doors into our farms because of biosecurity and have more strict, but now we have technologies that we can present our farms to public, maybe embracing more technology to engage closer to the public.
Yeah. Other questions from the audience? Yeah, Alexandra.
The gene editing.
Oh, question up front. Oh, in the back there was one. Go ahead.
Okay, Joanne Ellenbaugh with Farm Journal. It's pork. A question about gene editing. Can you give us an idea on the timeline? And you did mention labeling. How does that impact the rest of the food chain?
I can give you an idea on the timeline. I mean, I'm kind of on the gene jock end of it, so I'm more involved with how it's deployed from a technical standpoint. The timeline to actually, you know, for the pork industry to work through the pyramid from the top to producer is probably about 5 years. So you would generate a bunch of founder animals in that top of the pyramid, probably in a year or two, and then as genetics go, the breeding goes through, then, you know, you'd be shipping animals to feeder pigs out around that time in the industry. So it takes at least 5 years to work through the pyramid, and that's just a small portion probably. In terms of how it's going to affect the markets, I just can't predict how that's going to happen yet. Obviously, companies are looking to get global approvals, so everywhere that has a framework in place for regulatory, they're going with their approval packages to try to get them approved. In the United States recently, we've had a kind of a clarification of how the regulatory works, so that's a step in the right direction for us as well. But overall, how it impacts the markets, I think it's going to roll out slow enough that there'll be time to adjust and time for these key markets to have approvals before it becomes an issue.
Up here in front.
With the gene editing, I'm a little oblivious to it all, but so when you do make a finding, are you giving that to all the semen companies then, or is it just one semen company has it? Do you how does that filtrate through everybody?
Sure.
Good question.
It depends on if we're the ones that make the discovery or not. I mean, in most cases, you know, there's a lot of academic research out there that are looking for different traits and genetics that go behind those traits. So if it's in an academic institution, it may be patented, and it may also just be published and out there and freely available, so anybody can use it. We're more the deployment people. We don't have our own pigs in the industry, for instance. So we'd partner with industry that would want to put those genetics into their animals. And there could be exclusivity, but I think our feeling has been that we would want to offer that to everybody and it'd be non-exclusive.
Yeah, good question. No, thank you. Other questions from the audience? Tammy, you talked a little bit about capture of weight as one of the efficiencies that your camera technology can do, and I think about the three-dimensional type of imaging that you would have. In that regard, can you give us a sense of where that technology is at in terms of coming to market? If there's products that are already commercially available, how effective are those, and how do they withstand like a real-world in-barn type of environment that those technologies would have to live in?
Right. There are some of those out, and they're utilizing them. There are two that are out. One of them is like a handheld, and I don't know the company. One of them is a handheld, so you can walk around and capture a weight. And there's another one that would be on a pin wall or on a ceiling and capture weights as animals came and went, and it sort of averages over an entire pin. I think what we want to do is we want to be able to know pig A, and this is a little bit about what David said. We want to know that pig A weighs 80 kilograms or 80 pounds today, and we want to know when it is at market weight. And we can predict that, so we can help predict loads and stuff like that. So I would think if they're weighing or estimating weight from images on a group of animals, it's just a matter of putting the ID component to that. And Chris, you and I have talked about this before. RFID is expensive, right? I mean, it's expensive. It's $2 a tag or $2.50 a tag. So it's a little expensive. So right now, automatically IDing and for sure IDing that pig electronically, it's not only goes into the cost of the tag, but the cost of the equipment. So I think that's being able to put it to market. I think we can do that rather quickly. Being able to do it in a way that we aren't putting a lot of technology and a lot of cost in the barn is going to take us a little longer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, David, did I hear you say that's $4 to $5 depending on the price of pigs, $4 to $5 in opportunity cost?
Yeah, and don't quote me on this. But
yeah, no, absolutely not.
It will be what we value internally when I work with an integrator, and it was the opportunity of being more precise about selling the pigs, marketing the pigs, right? The timing of it and the accuracy of selecting the right pigs. And that's where I think technology can play a big role. Going back to your question, I think, and maybe I just want to take producers one step back. And I see more and more companies estimating weights different ways, manually with portal devices or fixed cameras. I will encourage you to ask them questions like how accurate they are, right? Yeah. And ask for the data, right? I am comparing weights, actual weights and scale, and what is the environment, because as we think about computer vision, your pigs might be different, right? Just the color of the pig might be different, and that changed the equation. I want to know how the system is going to work in my environment. And then two, have they done homework on reliability? And that is, if I install a camera, do I have the same functionality of the camera the next year or 2 years, right? Because I need to think about how do I pay back my investment.
Yeah, there's got to be return on that investment, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I think about our friends that have feathers, right? They have an advantage in estimating weight because the chickens or the turkeys want to naturally roost. And so they hang a bar in their barns, and a chicken jumps up there and it captures its weight, and then it jumps off, and another one jumps on there and it captures its weight, and then the first one jumps back on there, right, and it captures its weight again. And you get 40,000 measurements in a 24-hour period, and pretty soon you know the average of the barn of chickens, right?
Yeah.
So Maybe we could gene edit a pig to roost on a.
I was just thinking about that.
Yeah, I knew you were. I called you out. So, other questions about technologies? What other things? Yeah, here we go. Go ahead.
Thanks for your presentations, very interesting. I was just wondering, do you think that use of technology, and if it develops further in the industry, that's a way we could attract labour force and the next generation, rather than just seeing the pig industry as a manual task or manual jobs, that, they can actually go in and use technology as part of their work?
Yeah, so you stole the words right out of my mouth. Actually, when I talk to young people, that's what I tell them. It really changes the dialogue we have with young people. And I always use dairy as an example because dairymen get up really early. So if I have 100 kids sitting in a classroom and I go, okay, so who wants to work in the animal industry? Raise your hand. And I will have 20 of them raise their hand. And I go, okay, I'm a dairyman. I need you at work at 4:30 in the morning because that's when we milk our cows. And they are like, and then I go, and by the way, and it's true, you're low man on the totem pole. I need you to work every other weekend, and I'm sorry, but you're going to work Christmas, New Year's, and Easter this year because I need you to work on. And they go, and then I go, and I can only pay you X, right? And they go, well, I can go down the road and work at heavy equipment, and they pay me $3 or $4 more, right? And so I think technology changes that equation. So now I go, okay, do you want to come work at my barn? And I need you to manage this computer system. I need you to make sure that the feeders are working, not feed pigs, not milk cows, but I need you to go make sure that the computers and the robots and the technology is working. And oh, by the way, you might have to calibrate some stuff, and you will have to go check the animals. Now we get some animal lovers that really want to work with animals that can come and work, right? And it's just a different conversation we have with those young people. And I really think that will encourage more young people to come back to the farm. It will encourage more new people to get into the business that we haven't had for a long time.
If I may add a little more. So last fall was my first class. I had to interact with 73 young people, and majority of them, they have made their minds on with their careers, but there's a good proportion. They are very passionate about animals and swine, but they were questioning about that career because they haven't found their passion within the industry yet, right? And so your point is very interesting, and so I tried to expose to what is the future of the swine industry. And the two areas I presented to them was the digital technology, so data, and I found enthusiasm about that. So I think that changed the mind of some of the students, which was exciting. And then technology of what we're talking about. So yes, I think, but I think we have two roles here. As educators, we have to present them what is, how they can they fulfill their dreams into the swine production with areas that they are intrigued about. And then two, as producers, how do we create those jobs too? Because as I was into the industry, we were doing the same things as we have done it for many years. And it was hard to see positions for these people. But it's our role to create those. As Tammy alluded to, is we're going to have more technology and computers. So let's go find them. Let's show them that it's attractive too, right? They will have to go to the barn because you don't want to lose the connection to the pig. They have to understand the pig. But they also can apply what they are passionate about, data or technology, into the pig.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Yeah, question.
So my question has to do with inefficiencies. So technology, the advancement of technologies is to try to address inefficiencies within the production facility or whatnot. I was thinking just specifically on labor side, but then since we just kind of talked about that, just wanted to know, what do you think are the low-hanging fruit, the inefficiencies that technology could quickly advance to address in the sooner versus later?
I will say one of the biggest ones, and we discussed briefly, but is survivability of pigs to me, is livability of them. How do we increase and how do we maintain most of my pigs into my herd, right? I think that's the biggest one, and there's different phases. There's different areas where you can go to. I'm fascinated, and that's where our interest and research is into the farrowing process. I think that's a very short process, but yet that's a big inefficiency. We still need to save more pigs. We still need to do more for the sow, right? Because that is where I get to generate my throughput into the system, as an example.
So my low-hanging fruit, I think we can do with technology, is find those pigs that maybe haven't found the feeder when you move them into the barn, maybe haven't found the water. So if we can identify those pigs in a day or two, we have pigs that come into the barn and for the first 20 days spend less than 10 minutes at the feeder. Why? I don't know. But if we can identify those pigs, we can find out if it is that they are the low pig on the totem pole, or if there's a health issue, we can identify those pigs. And same with drinkers. We have pigs that aren't going to the drinker, which is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. I was shocked. But I have pigs in the barn that aren't getting water from the water source. So why is that? And I think identifying those pigs is key. Finding out if there's a disease issue, is there an injury issue? Because the caretaker can't see all of that when they come into the barn.
Yeah, that's one way I'm different from pigs, because usually within a short period of time, I scope out all the food and water options, or beverage options in a room.
You didn't make it much past the ribs.
Yeah, I didn't.
By the front
First
gate.
booth, I just didn't even get to see the rest of it. I succumbed to the first one. So, obviously, I think disease is a big one. I mean, that's an inefficiency. If you have loss from disease, that you can't replace that. That's one area. Then, the newborn nutrition. There's definitely traits for improving milk yield for sows and milk qualities that could result in weaning more animals. So things like that, I think, are the areas I would think about for inefficiencies.
Other questions from the audience? Question back here, yeah.
On what you're talking about with technology to identify either behavior or health status, like in real time, I mean, to me, you can't get that technology in my hands fast enough.
Yeah.
So how do we need more science at the university, or do we need entrepreneurship and investment to try to bring that to market, or how do we do that faster?
I think it's twofold. I think just handing it over and having technology companies put it out there, because we can't do that, right? That isn't something that I don't have the time to do. However, we have to understand, because you have a decrease in time at the feeder. Is that relevant on day one? Is it not important till day 3? And so those are some of the questions we're wrestling with. And the other thing is we don't have so the one thing I say is when we use technology to create models to predict something, right? You have to have good data going in before you have good information coming out. Garbage in, garbage out, right? Or good data in, good data out. So getting a daily health status on every single pig is a difficult and expensive thing, even on the university side. So some of that stuff we are trailing because we don't have all of that great data coming in. So, helping us think about how to capture the golden standard data is something we need to do.
What are some of the other limitations that are sort of hurdles or roadblocks to bringing technology to bear in a applicable way? Any thoughts on that?
I think it's understanding the producer, right? What's my way to talk to the producer so he can understand the value of the technology, and is willing to invest into that technology. But it's as I had to face an implementation of technology. We had 300 barns in Iowa, so that's become huge, and every site has 4 barns, so you can make the math. And he's finding a technology that's reliable. And that's what I will encourage the companies is to do the homework in going to the barn, an actual barn, expose the technology to moisture, temperature, right, dust, and measure the reliability. That's data I need to see before I can make that investment.
As I think about our panelists here, I think about the different areas that they work in, and I think maybe there is some limitation to the technical expertise that we have, right? It's relatively short period of time we've been engaging computer engineers and computer scientists in this area in animal agriculture particularly, right? They've mostly been hired by IBM Watson in the past. And so now we're asking them to work in a different area that they're unaccustomed to. And so we have to train up those individuals to really go into this role. I think University of Illinois has a cross-listed degree between animal science and computer science. And I wish they had made it between animal science and computer engineering, because the engineering is the hardware component that talks about the durability in those dusty, humid, gas-filled environments. I made it sound terrible, like we raise pigs in that way, but I didn't mean it like that. But for sensor technology, that's what kills a sensor, right, is being housed day in and day out in that. So we are at the forefront of asking computer scientists and computer engineers to engage in this area. So that technology, and then Dan, that your gene editing technology, raising people up that understand animal agriculture, and also understand the gene jockeying thing is that technical expertise, I think, is one of our limitations as well.
Yeah, our industry, like gene editing in animals, for instance, we lose probably most of our great scientists to human gene therapy or human therapies. So there's a lot of overlap in the technology that would be used to treat a human of a genetic disease that there is used to develop animals that are resistant to a disease. So, being able to keep some of those people. So I grew up on a farm, and I stayed in that industry, but I also dabble in the biomedical industry because there's just not a lot of dollars that support the kind of work that I do in the agriculture industry, and it's even difficult on the investment side. So we need the investment to continue it, and then you need to have enough interest that you can keep the interested parties working in the ag field rather than going into the human medicine field.
Yeah.
So Chris, I have a video that I share when I do slides a lot, and it is of somebody cleaning the barn after the pigs have left, and they're using high pressure wash, and they're going over my RFID carefully placed antennas, right? And then
giving them a blast.
Then there's my computer that's sitting there, and I'm standing there, and the only reason I could really carefully and calmly record this video is I had the other 5 pens that had already been cleaned before I got there, and they were functional. So I could sit there and carefully watch that. But the thing is that when we put technology in the barn, it has to be prepared to be in the barn. Because I can't say to producer, hey, I put this camera up over the feeder. Can you go put a bag over it before you clean? I mean, first of all, that's never going to happen. Second of all, do we really want that to happen? Because if we aren't cleaning the technology we put in the barn, we're putting you at risk we aren't maintaining biosecurity between our groups. So when we put technology in, it's about the environment when the pigs are there, but also about the cleaning environment after the pigs leave. So,
yeah, good. Thank you. Say that again with a microphone in your hand.
I was just thinking aloud, if you have a shutter that closes, when the cleaning is happening,
Yep.
Yeah.
right? And for the dust and stuff, you could have filters before the atmosphere that enters the sensing chamber, right? So you could filter out the dust, you can filter out the particulate, things like that.
I agree. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's doing the homework in the hard work
Yep.
that is going to be sustaining my technology into the barn. So I agree.
So I also have a video of and we were getting really great video, and all of a sudden there's a black spot that took up 90% of our image, and we could not figure out what on earth it was. We also had one that we had a line across our depth image. We couldn't figure out what that was. Both of those were spiders.
Yeah.
One of them was a spider web that just went across it, and it just completely obliterated. It wasn't even touching the camera. It was in the environment. So stuff like that is are going to be some of the hurdles we're going to have to overcome, right?
Yeah, there's no limitations to any technology that we can deploy. There are certain limitations to every single one of them. So I'm sitting here thinking, what are the limitations to gene editing technology? What are those things? I think you and I talked beforehand, and we can, at this time, we can stack about 4 or 5 gene edited traits on top of each other. What's the limitation in gene editing?
Yeah, I mean, it's limited to really the high impact or the high value traits where one gene or one change makes a big difference. You can't really affect some of the smaller effect, the additive traits, very effectively. So you're really there's only going to be a handful of edits that are probably going to be worthwhile for the pig industry. Other industries might be different. Cattle probably will have more. But you can use these tools also in research, and we were talking about this a little bit. A lot of the discovery work, validation of certain traits or alleles that are something you want to select for in a population, you can validate that they're actually functionally causing a consequence by using the gene editing tools to research that in the laboratory setting. So I'd say that predominantly, I mean, right now, CRISPR-Cas9 or any of the gene editing tools are used a lot in research, a lot more than they're going to be used probably practically in industry, just to discover various elements about the genetics or used as a discovery tool even, to go in without a hypothesis and just do screens where you can determine if there's specific genes that are associated with a certain function. So,
Yeah, so that
those are used a lot in other fields like gene therapy, human therapy.
Yeah, so I think about understanding the underlying biology, the biological processes that go on inside of the pig is probably ultimately where gene editing will really lend its value to the industry, rather much more so than in commercial production for various things. So yeah, I think that too. Yeah. So one technology that we have not talked about, but I would like to discuss, why I have smart people here, is virtual reality. So as you think about VR, and I thought earlier someone asked about, it was you, Tammy, that said, we need to be open and transparent to the public, and yet at the same time, we can't bring them onto our farm for biosecurity reasons. How can we, for example, deploy virtual reality, or what are some of the applications for virtual reality technologies? And I just encourage you to brainstorm with the audience.
So I have a colleague in South Korea who has worked very hard on creating a virtual reality swine barn. And he does it for a couple different reasons, one of which is to bring producers in and help them understand airflow and stuff. So really they put on the goggles and they're in a room, but they're seeing the swine barn, right? And so they can change the controls and they can see how the air flows through the barn and stuff like that. So imagine if we could have cameras up, and digital twin is, if I'm understanding it right, is like you are using technology and sensors in the barn to recreate a virtual space. So imagine if we had a barn all instrumented and people could go to the state fair, and if they walk in a trailer or if they come into a room and put on virtual reality, and then they can look around the barn and they can see the pigs eating and sleeping, and they can see the air flowing through the barn, and without putting cameras in the barn and risking and risking bad press or an animal that is not in ideal conditions, right?
Yeah, and maybe one thing I can think about is, as nutritionist in my past life, I like to formulate my diet, design a diet, obviously to enhance the growth and performance of pigs. But I also want to see how the pig is performing. So I think about virtual reality in a way that I can see my pigs, how they're performing, if I can take advantage of it after receiving a change into a diet. The same will be for veterinarians, right? They would like to see how pigs are performing after a treatment, or if they have a call from a farm, pigs are not eating, not doing well. Can I get to see it without traveling 3, 4, 5 hours away?
Oh, yeah,
That might be an application to it.
That's amazing, right? I was thinking about HR and onboarding of folks into the farms, right? How could we use virtual reality to augment the training of new employees and potentially retain more of them, right? One of the biggest issues with labor is you interview somebody on Monday and they don't show up on Friday, right? Yeah. And so you've invested a week's worth of time and effort into them. How could we deploy virtual reality to improve onboarding of new employees? So, well, anybody else have one last burning question? Oh, we got one up in front.
My question relates to unintended consequences, and I think the conversation around, especially like animal caretakers, makes a lot of sense, especially if they're going to be coming from a position where they have experience with animal care. This technology can make their lives easier. If we get to a point, say down the road, where they don't have that animal husbandry experience or the knowledge of nutrition, genetics of animals, but using technology, like how do you keep them both moving together in a way that doesn't have an unintended consequence of they understand the technology well, but they couldn't also see that a pig was ill or injured or wasn't performing well?
So, and that's one of my key points when I give a talk too. We can never eliminate the animal caretaker in the equation, right? You can put a lot of tech out there, you can make the animal caretaker good, but we need to make sure that we don't lose the human touch, because the best sensor and the best computing power is right here, and I truly believe that. So how do we keep that going together? I think as long as we are attracting the right people to the swine industry or to animal ag in general, I think as long as they have a passion for animals, I think we keep those together. But maybe I'm being optimistic. I don't know.
What color are your glasses? Oh, they're clear. I thought they were rose-colored there for a second.
I'd imagine they're still going to have to respond to whatever the technology is picking up, right? So if you have to still respond and address the situation, then you're at least getting some training there and some hands-on experience about what's going on. But
one here, one more.
I guess going beyond virtual reality is augmented reality.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Augmented
So are
reality
we
is next
thinking about that
generation.
as well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Can you imagine an animal caretaker wearing glasses and they walk in the barn and here's a little bubble across this pig that's moving across the barn, right? And it says, I need care now. So we aren't marking pigs, but we're using augmented reality or being able to use augmented reality to then, so when something needs repaired, you're looking at it and you're talking to the call center and they go, oh yeah, you need to adjust this or you need to adjust that. So
I'll give you one example that I seen closely, and one of the inefficiencies we talk about and where it comes to my mind, especially in high feed costs for a producer, is managing feed logistics. So I have seen technologies that can determine or estimate the way how much feed you have in a bin, which is a better way than throwing a rock into a bin, right? But one of the issues we have there too is when we send a feed truck and a driver who might not understand the value of having the right feed in the right bin. I have seen an example where you can take your phone, and the phone will tell you which bean is the one you have to deliver the feed on. So yeah, it's an excellent question, technology too, that we can take advantage of.
Well, thank you guys. We just have a couple more minutes to wrap up. So just can you tell the producers that are here in the room, where can they go to find out more about what each of you talked about, and how can they adopt or engage that, or learn how to do that for those technologies that you've talked about today?
So I need to get my webpage up and running again. But yeah, University of Nebraska, if you look up my name, you should be able to get to my webpage and read some of the stuff we're doing. Yeah, we're doing some really exciting stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. Dan?
Yeah, so for us, I mean, the website excelogen.com is where any announcements that we have related to the industry come out. You can follow. Genus has got a lot of work going on right now in the space, so I think that they're good to pay attention to. But it's really a small group of people, so there's not a lot of places to go to learn more about the impact of gene editing in livestock right now. Mm-hmm. So it's a pretty small industry, and we're hoping to expand that, but it takes time.
Yeah, same for me. It's been very fast months during this year. Haven't put my website yet, but Department of Animal Science in Iowa State University, we're constructing a fantastic team of experts. Juan is here, genetic expert that is working in PLF. We had people in nutrition that have the interest on PLF or smart farming, I'll call it. So yeah, reach to us. We'd be very happy to engage into good discussions about technology.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know about you folks, but the possibilities for technology that the panel has demonstrated to us today, and the expertise that they represent, I'm grateful for that. I have to check my socks to make sure they're not quite blown off. So let's thank them for their participation in the panel.